Okay, good morning. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad we're able to be back together. Hope everyone is doing well. We have officially entered into the month of Adar, which is very exciting. We have Purim right around the corner next week. We have Ta'anit Esther, and then we have Purim on Monday night and Tuesday. Be'ezrat Hashem, it should be a day of tremendous simcha for everyone and a month of tremendous simcha for everyone. So what I wanted to do this week is something a little bit different. Since Adar is meant to be a lighter month, a month of joy and happiness, I wanted to do something that I thought would be a little bit more fun and uplifting. And so that's why, if you saw in the email, I wanted to do it a little bit more like workshop style. So I brought something fun for us to kind of dive into. Some of you may be familiar with it, but if not, I'll explain it, and then we will be able to get to know ourselves a little bit better, and then also be able to understand relationships a little bit better and how to build relationships. So one of the reasons why I'm choosing that as kind of the theme is because I really loved this. I don't know how many of you have seen the flyer going around that talks about Avas Chinam and building Avas Chinam amongst the Jewish people, Leilui Nishmas, those who have been nifter in these last couple weeks. So in particular, the Paley brothers and the Yaniv brothers are on the flyer. Zichronim Levarchave. I'll add to that that our Shiur should be also Leilu Nishmas, Alfred Ben Nisim Virgina, and Refuah Shlema to Yafashino Bas Rivka, Shidduch for Aviva Bas Bracha and Emma Bas Sarah. And anyone that you would like to dedicate the learning to, please by all means feel free to post it in the chat or just think about it in your mind, whatever you would like to do. But I loved this idea of Avas Chinam and meaning like brother love among our. It's basically like the love for no reason. It's just loving our fellow Yidden, our fellow Jewish brothers and sisters. Which is certainly a very timely and appropriate concept for Purim, because the whole idea behind Purim is creating connection, elevation, revelation of light, remembering the miracle that happened during that time, and making the most of that. And so how do we know that that's one element of Purim and what we're meant to be doing is with the whole concept of Mishloach Manos. So I'm not sure how many of you know or not, but it's actually written that when you are choosing who to give your Mishloach Manos to, and according to Halacha, everyone is required, I believe, to give to, and men give to men, and women give to women. And you're supposed to give something that is of substance. So, whether it's a drink and something to eat, but, something that someone can say a brachot over. There are different minhagim about what to give. Some people literally give a full meal. Some people give a bottle of wine and some mizonos and, a cake or something. All of those different types of things are acceptable, and you do according to your minhag and whatever you're guided by your Rebbeim to do. But the idea behind giving Mishloach Manos, and the most effective way to give Mishloach Manos, is to actually choose to give Mishloach Manos to someone that it's difficult for you to give to. So it means the idea, because if you want to give a gift to your best friend, well, that's a joy, right? That's a joy. There's really nothing inside of you that cringes when you want to hand over a gift to your best friend. You love them. You love them and you respect them and you honor them and you want to give them gifts. So where does it become challenging? It becomes challenging to give a gift to somebody that you don't get along with, to somebody that maybe you have a quarrel with, or that you're not completely at peace with. And so it's a beautiful tie-in to the idea of Avat Chinam with the Mishloach Manos, the idea that you would give it to somebody. Let's say you have a neighbor that you have a complication with. So that would be a perfect type of a person to bring Mishloach Manos to. Or you have someone that you had a quarrel with at some point and was not completely water under the bridge. Those are the types of people that it's the most effective thing. Why? Because the idea is that you're reaching out an olive branch. You're reaching out an idea of saying, you know what, I'm wanting to make peace. I'm bringing you this gift basket or whatever it is in order to be able to have you benefit from my efforts of giving to you. So that's a primary idea behind the mishloach manos, and wanting to make sure that you're making the most of this mitzvah. And so building a sense of peace and camaraderie and connection is behind this idea of mishloach manos. So part of, this can be actually the first activity of this workshop style shiur that we're going to do, is to make note in your journal right now of some names that pop in your mind. Again, women give to women and men give to men. That's the most sneeze way to do this. And to pop in, maybe jot down some names of people in your mind that over the last year or years or whenever you've had some kind of machloket with, some disagreement or something that leaves things not exactly, smooth. And that's a possibility of who you could bring mishloach manos to. And when you're going to give the mishloach manos, you're going to set your intention that you're giving the mishloach manos to this person in particular to create ahavas chinam. And so that's a beautiful tie-in to this theme that's going around in order to honor, the two sets of brothers in particular that are nifter, that's on the flyer that's been going around, and then of course anybody else in your life that you are wanting to extend an olive branch to in your own way. We talked a little bit about that at the end of the last shiur that I gave on my father-in-law, which was the idea that there is so much that we can do in life. And unfortunately, many of us wait until it's too late. Once someone, lo aleinu chas v'shalom, ad me'ah v'esrim for everyone, once someone passes away, so then that's it. That's sof hasipur. That it's a hafsaka that there's no coming back from. You cannot anymore make amends. The person is in another place and you're still here, and of course, always with our intention, we can send messages, but we don't know if they're going to be received. And really, the work is to be done here in this physical world. It's not to wait until the spiritual realm. That's why we're here. We're here to do the work now, today, in this world. So, mishloach manos is one derech. It's one path to utilize to be able to make peace, basically. So I encourage everyone to maybe jot down a couple of names of people that would interest you to maybe reach out and to accomplish with this chag, with this holiday for the mishloach manos, to be able to accomplish that. Okay. I normally talk about tzaddikim. Obviously, this past week, Yesterday was the Chilulah of Moshe Rabbeinu. I believe I posted that in my chat. And of course, with the holiday of Purim, it's not so much that it's their Chilulah coming up, but obviously we have many tzaddikim and many amazing figures in Jewish history to admire and learn about. Obviously, Mordechai and Esther, the whole Jewish nation at that time that came together to fast and to pray and to daven for Esther's success to have a Yeshua and save the Jewish people. The Purim story is an exceptional story. I'm not going to get into the details of the Purim story, but I would encourage you, depending on your level of knowledge about the story, to really seek out different sources and learn different aspects beyond what we learn in grammar school about the story of Mordechai and Esther and Haman and Achashverosh. It's a very deep and meaningful story, and one that we really need to hang on to today in the condition of the world and in the condition and the threats to Am Yisrael and the increase in anti-Semitism. And we have to understand that these threats that exist throughout history to Am Yisrael are very, very real. And it's only by hanging on to and clinging to Torah and clinging to the tzaddikim of the past, and clinging to our ability to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and taking upon ourselves to grow, taking upon ourselves more mitzvos. These are the kinds of things that allow Am Yisrael to continue. They are the foundational pieces of what Am Yisrael thrives upon, and they are the singular reasons why Hashem doesn't just destroy the world again, chas v'shalom. So we should take the Purim story very, very personally and very seriously. And as I've said before, we have to take the events of the world very personally. We have to know that, God forbid, every single time we lose someone in a terror attack, and every time we see these holy souls being taken from the world, we have to take it personally to think, what am I doing in my own life that is contributing to those events? Every time there is a blizzard and a hurricane and this horrible earthquake that happened in Turkey and in Syria and the loss of thousands and thousands and thousands of lives, we can't just glance at that and then be like, oh, that's so sad, and look away. We have to really look at it and say, Hashem is upset. It's written in the texts. When Hashem is upset, natural disasters occur. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, and I know this can be a controversial statement, what I'm about to say, but Rebbeim throughout history have said it, and they get eaten alive by the general, klal. But it is actually written in the texts that when those things happen, it's due to the sins of Am Yisrael. So that's not me. I'm just the messenger. But I am saying that is written. And it's not just in one place. And it's been spoken by Rebbeim and Tzaddikim throughout history to say that the condition of the world is a reflection of the behavior of Am Yisrael. So when Am Yisrael is proper and upright and following the Torah and living according to Torah means, and the laws of Hashem and the things that He had set forth, then things become more quiet. When we are not doing that, when we are acting in ways against the Torah, especially Jewish people, then we have to understand that every action that we take has an impact and a ripple among the world at large. And we begin to see these kind of massive disasters, chas v'shalom, that start to transpire, and we look around today and it's not hard to find them. We have how many hundreds of grieving families from righteous people that have been lost, and millions, I would imagine, of grieving people who have been impacted by the loss of life and natural disasters and been displaced from their homes and so on and so forth. We see the struggles of the people living in Eretz Yisrael and how difficult things are. So the fact that we're willing to be here and show up and think about these things and reflect upon them, and then turn it internally to reflect upon our own lives and what we can be doing better is kol hakavod, to you guys and to anybody that might hear the recording, that you're showing up to do the work and to learn, and I believe that means a tremendous amount at large, and let's hope that the energy that we put into our shiurim and to our learning and to our self-improvement and reflection will give chizuk to Am Yisrael and give Hashem more reasons to love us and to spare us, Be'ezrat Hashem, and to bring Mashiach Tzidkenu, I hope, so that we can live to see those days, Be'ezrat Hashem. Okay. So that's my little spiel about Purim. And I have one other thing I wanted to read from Rav Avigdor Miller on a section that he writes about the Simcha in the month of Adar that I thought was great. So this is a question and answer section in his book on Moadim, the holidays. It's the second. There's Moadim 1 and Moadim 2. So this is found in Moadim 2. And this section is talking about the happiness of Adar. It says in the month of Adar, we must be marbim b'simcha. How does one acquire more happiness during this month? And I thought that's really an excellent question, because we're going about with our lives and we're faced with so many challenges on personal levels, and some of us have health challenges and financial challenges and work challenges and family challenges, and life is full of challenges. That's we understand. That's the system. That's how we grow. We grow through challenge. So how do we live our everyday life and go on? But in the month of Adar, we're commanded to be more happy, right? We're commanded to find that simcha from within. So let's see what Rav Avigdor Miller says about this. He says, and the answer to this question is that you must know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has made in each person a fountain of simcha. Only that the pump for this simcha must be primed. Once you open up the fountain and it starts gushing forth, you'll be surprised at how much simcha there really is within you. You are born with the ability to be full of happiness. You can start thinking how good this month of Adar is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed us a picture of La'asid La'avo, of what the future holds for Am Yisrael. Haman is hanging with all his sons. That is what's going to happen in the future. That is the truth. That is how it's supposed to be. That all of the Rishayim, all of the evil people in the world should be hanging all of the time, and that the Tzaddikim should be looking up and enjoying in the punishments of the Rashayim. We have so many enemies today. It's funny, we were just talking about this. We always have had enemies throughout history, but our enemies today, these were the ones that we're going to see. These are the ones that we're going to see suffer. I'm not saying that we'll be the ones to do it. Hashem will be the ones to do it for us. They'll be hanging and it will be a pleasant surprise. You know, it's written throughout various texts that one of the joys of the Geula, one of the joys of the Mashiach coming, is that those who have been living according to the ways of Hashem are going to rejoice in seeing the Rashaim receive their fill, essentially. That when justice is duly served, you know, and so we have to know that for according to our culture and cultural sensitivities, that sounds so terrible. What do you mean you're gonna take joy in someone else's suffering? I mean, the fact of the matter is that is a part of human nature. In truth, that when someone has been wronged, I thought that we are not allowed to rejoice in the pain of our enemies. So Julia, excellent question. That is actually also written, but however, we're talking about in the days of Geula, in the final judgment, when all is said and done, that at that point in time, when Hashem has made all his chashbonos, meaning every single human being has been brought back to life, every neshama is being brought back to the world, which is what's happening right now. All the tzaddik, so at that point, in those final days and those final judgments, the tzaddikim will be able to rejoice in the judgments of the Rashayim. And again, we clarify by saying that the Rashayim are the people that are living neged HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They're living against the ways of Hashem. So those are people, again, we don't understand. We can't even begin to pretend to understand Cheshbonot Shamayim and Hashem's calculations in His judgments. We don't go there. It's really not our business. Our business is understanding our own choices in our own lives and how that might play out in our end or in the end of days. B'ezrat Hashem, that we shouldn't have an end, but and so we have to know, though, that we've discussed this before, that everything in Hashem's world is exact. There's no error in judgment. So everything is mida keneged mida, action against action, and everything is fully just, and there are no mistakes. And so we understand that that's Hashem's creation. And we plug into that in whatever way that we choose to plug into it, and then in the end we see what are the end results. So in the end of days, we do have the right to look and have simcha at seeing the fact that the Geula has come and that the righteous will be rewarded in their way and the wicked will be quote unquote rewarded in whatever is coming to them. Okay, hold on, let me go back here. What a huge surprise it was when Haman was the one hanging as opposed to Mordechai. So if you remember, in the story of Purim, Haman prepared the big tall thing that his plan was to hang Mordechai. Little did he know he was actually building for his own demise, right? So this was a shock and a surprise to the Jewish people. And you can imagine their joy when they realized that they had merited having a Yeshua, and Haman and his sons were the ones that were actually to be punished. And so Rav Avigdor Miller finishes this section by saying, quite simply, you can also think about how good it is to just be alive. What a pleasure it is to be alive. What a simcha it is to be alive. So keep on thinking happy thoughts, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will open up the fountain of happiness that is in your mind, and it will start gushing forth within the month of Adar. So this idea of thinking about how good it is to be alive ties directly back to our very, very, very first shiur when we talked about the power of thought. And we talked about how important it is to be a thinker, to be somebody who thinks, who goes deep, who participates in that thought process and doesn't just blindly accept stuff from the standpoint that it should have a meaningful impact. There should be an element of reflection. So what it means for us is that if we have a struggle, let's say we're fighting with depression or anxiety, and we have a struggle trying to get to that place of unlocking and unleashing the simcha, the way that Rav Avigdor Miller talks about here, then we need to understand we have to go back to the basics. And the basics are that if you're thinking, it means you're breathing. And if you are breathing, it means you are alive. And that is your starting point. And from there, you build your gratitude. You build your hakaras hatov to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for every single thing that you have. Do you have your hands? Mazal tov. Do you have your sight? Mazal tov. Do you have your smell? Mazal tov. Can you eat? Mazal tov. Mazal tov. It's a big chiddush. It's a big, big, big understanding and realization to know that when you go back to the foundational, can you use the bathroom? If you can use the bathroom, you are beyond blessed. We have to go back to those kinds of thoughts. And that's how we begin to build our simcha. And so if you have a hard time in the month of Adar to tap into your simcha, go back to those basics, start making your lists. So right now in your journal, honestly, take a minute while I'm going to segue to this next section and just jot down for yourself 3 to 5 things that you can right off the top of your head think about how thankful you are for those things and write them down and use that as the foundational building blocks for how you're going to continue to build your simcha throughout the month of Adar. So last shiur, I did my entire shiur on my father-in-law, Alfred Ozer, Zichrono Livracha. And it's hard to believe it even, but tonight and tomorrow are the shloshim, marks the 30 days since his passing. And Be'ezat Hashem, that we're going to do a dinner for him, and that his matzeva will be erected tomorrow in Yerushalayim. With some wonderful, wonderful people that are helping us with that, and it helps us to reflect. But Purim is going to be very different for our family this year, and I've been asking myself exactly this question: how are we going to infuse ourselves with simcha when my husband is an avel? He has the status of a mourner. And for those of you not familiar, in particular, when you are mourning for a parent, there are more stringent requirements that have to be observed, where you have a lot more restrictions on you in terms of what you can and cannot do. And one of the things you cannot do is participate in big simcha. So we have here a conflict because we have an obligation to celebrate Purim, a chag of simcha. We have an obligation to be mesameach in the month of Adar, and yet at the same time, we have someone in our family who is an avel, and we have to figure out how to balance it. It's raised some interesting questions. So according to halacha, I know what we need to do. I know that we participate in the mitzvot of Purim, mishloach manos, and a seuda. But normally at my house we make a big balagan on Purim. We make a big lot of music and food and people coming in and out all day long. And we're not going to be able to do that this year, unfortunately. But we have to find a way to find our simcha in Purim and honor the chag while also honoring the memory of our father, Alfred, and of course my husband as an avel. So that will be an interesting balance for us to strike. we'll be able to have our su'uda, but we're not really allowed to have guests. It has to be just only family. But if you are not in that situation and you are able to freely enjoy, then I highly recommend you live it up and tap into your simcha. It's such an unbelievably incredible, powerful day. And make use of it to the best that you can. So now I want to segue over. So by now you've done a couple different things. You've written a few different things in your journal. You've made note of who you could potentially give mishloach manos to with the intention of extending an olive branch. So ideally figuring out some people, some women that you need to maybe smooth things over with. So that was the first thing to write down in your journal. And the second thing now was to be able to list 3 to 5 points of gratitude to help you tap into your simcha for the month of Adar, and use that as your foundational base to be able to build your simcha during the month of Adar and throughout the month of Adar. And then, of course, working to make the most of what you can in the Chag of Purim. Any questions so far? Any questions? Any comments? Anything? You're welcome to unmute, ask a question, make a comment.
Hi, Mia. Sorry, I just joined in. What did you say was the first thing to write on the journal?
Okay, the first thing to write on the journal, we talked about the power of the mitzvah of mishloach manos. We tied that to the theme of Avas Chinam and this effort that is going around Le'elui Nishmas, the 2 sets of brothers that were nifter. And the idea that really behind giving mishloach manos is not to give to your best friend. It's not hard to give to people you love and get along with. The idea behind mishloach manos is to build Avas Chinam. And so you want to give your mishloach manos to somebody, women to women, men to men, who maybe you've had a little bit of a conflict with in the past. It could be a neighbor, it could be a relative, it could be a friend, anybody. And that's how you're going to make the most of these mishloach manos and to build Avas Chinam for this Purim. Make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
That was the first thing. Okay, and you got the second thing, right?
Yes.
Okay, great.
About what we're grateful for.
Exactly. Okay, at least 3 to 5 things, and you have to go back to the basics if necessary to build your simcha in the month of Adar. Okay, so I want to segue now into something that's a bit fun. Okay, hold on one second. Thank you very much. I joined a burning question since I learned and heard it for the first time from you. How can I hold space for? Okay, so Franciane, we can touch on that, but I want to move with the session, and if we have a few minutes, we can talk about it at the end. Otherwise, we'll pick it up at the next time. Is that okay? Okay, so I'm gonna move with the session. I'm gonna assume that's okay with you. Okay, so I want to segue into something fun. I wanted to do something fun today for the month of Adar. So you know, my background is in psychology, and I've been a clinical psychotherapist for decades already. And so there's something very, very fun and interesting. And actually, my daughter, who's in seminary now, she brought it to my attention because she just found it on her own, and we've been talking about it. And I thought this would be a really fun thing to kind of touch base on. And this is where it becomes more workshop style, okay? So how many of you are familiar at all with the concept of Enneagrams? Has anybody ever heard that before? Has to do with personality types.
Enneagram?
Yeah, I'm going to see exactly how to spell it, because I'm always terrible at spelling this word. 1 second.
I knew about the love languages, but I never heard it.
Yeah, okay, so the love languages is a different way of talking about relationships, in those specific. And I think we've touched on that before. Hold on, I'm looking for the exact word. One second. Okay, let's just call for, I'll find the word, but let's just call, okay, here we go. So this is based on the Myers-Briggs system. Have you ever heard of that? Myers-Briggs. Here, I'm going to type it in the chat. Hold on. It's like this. Myers-Briggs. Myers-Briggs. Okay? So if you want to learn more about it, you can search this up. But in particular, I'm referencing this book, and one of the reasons why I really like this book, there's a lot of stuff you can find on the internet about the Myers-Briggs. It's a very, very well-known psychological tool for helping people figure out their personality type and, let's say, what jobs might be good for them. Okay, but this book is actually written by a lady named Dr. Miriam Adahan, and it's taking the Myers-Briggs and plugging it into a Torah concept, which is super cool, because at the end of each chapter, when it talks about the personality type and it gives you suggestions for, let's say, possible professions and things to do or activities to be involved with, like, for example, one of the suggestions is Talmid Chacham. Right? Like as a profession, meaning like you would be somebody really, really good to go sit in kollel and learn all day long. I saw like that's an example. So it's very cool that they take these types and they're actually weaving it through a Torah lens, which is you can find a gazillion books about this online, but she's the only one, I believe, that's actually taken it and plugged it into a Jewish context. So it's very, very fun. So here's what I want to do to start out with our workshop, okay? So you have to understand that there are, if I'm not mistaken, about 16 different personality types. I'm not going to take you through each and every one, but here's why I want you to have your journal. Because we're going to walk through the 4 primary categories of personality typing through the Myers-Briggs. I'm going to read you a little bit about each one. You're going to take notes for yourself, and then I want you to see if you can come up with what you think you are. So by the end of our discussion, you should have 4 identifying letters, and the combination of those 4 letters is basically your personality type according to the Myers-Briggs. And then what you can do, after you verify that you think that's correct, is you can go and learn all about your type and do some reflection on what does that mean for you. Maybe there are areas of your personality that you're not aware of, or maybe you have challenges or strengths you were not aware of, and this can kind of bring that to the forefront for you to be able to utilize that in your life and in your relationships with other people. So, as you might imagine, and as you'll understand as we're going through this, there are certain personality types that are really, really like nicely aligned, right? Those are those people you meet and you're like, oh my God, that's my soul sister, right? Like that's my twin from another mother, right? Those are the kind of souls and personalities that you jive with, right? And then there are those personalities that are like completely your opposite, or like you thrive on totally different things, or you just literally do not get each other. You know, I was talking with my daughter, one of my daughters, the one that's in seminary, and we've been talking about this a lot because she just discovered this. So for her, this is super exciting. And we've been, chatting about it. And we've been talking about her siblings, so all my other kids, and what their personality types might be. And I always joke that my oldest son, who's now 26, I always say, he's not so impressed with me. My oldest son is not so impressed with me. He can take me or leave me. He loves me, but he's not so impressed with me. And we were joking about it, and I think it's because we have very different personality types. Like what he sees as logical and meaningful can be very different than what I see as logical and meaningful. So even though we love and respect each other, our personalities are like very, very different. So that's an example. So you see it play out in your marital relationship, in your family relationship with your kids, your parents, and the more you start opening your eyes to this, you see it in the workplace, you see it in your synagogue, you see it everywhere. You start to recognize key features of these different categories and how that might relate to your ability to kind of jive with someone, to kind of like find that connecting point. Like some people, you're like, yeah, this is just way too much work. I'm not interested in investing over here in this relationship because it's too hard. Now, the relationships where you're not related to a person, you generally, you don't have to, you're not obligated. But when it's your parent, or your child or your spouse or whoever, and you have an obligation. So now is when this really becomes useful, because the more you understand your own personality type and the more you can learn to understand someone else's, you can say, oh, I get it. I get it. They process totally different than me. They recharge completely different than me. They value things totally different than me. So like Gabriella said, you kind of get that same aha moment from the love languages, because you say, oh my gosh, my love language is totally different than my husband's love language, right? There's this aha moment of like, we're just different. And so when you are relating to people that you care about, then it matters to you to want to learn more about who they are and what their needs are, so you can reach out and make a stronger connection. Does all of that make sense? Okay, cool. So let's jump into this, because this is really, really super fun. Okay, so the first category in the overall personality types is the difference between extroversion and introversion. Extroversion and introversion. So what is the idea behind those two things? So extroversion has to do with external, right? Outside of yourself. Introversion has to do with internal, inside of yourself. Okay, hold on. I want to go straight to the chart. Okay, so I'm going to read to you in each section. There's a chart in the book, and it tells you characteristics of extroverted types and introverted types. So I'm going to walk through this now and show you the comparison, and you make notes for yourself where you think you're falling based upon these categories, okay? Okay, so extroverted type, act first, reflect later. Introverted types will reflect first and act later. You get the opposite? Again, extrovert will act first, reflect later. Introvert will reflect first and act later. So you decide for yourself what's most reflective of you. Okay, next one. Extrovert will focus on external cues. Introvert will feel depleted from social interaction. Meaning an extrovert will feel recharged after being in a large group of people. An introvert will feel exhausted after being in a large group of people. Extroverted people are talkative and quick to initiate conversations with others. Introverted people require a lot of I time or alone time. They're fine with being alone. They're comfortable to be alone. Extroverted people really want to be around others, okay? Next one. Extroverted types will seek a large variety of different types of people and activities to be involved with. Introverted people prefer one-on-one rather than large groups. So coffee with a close girlfriend versus meeting a bunch of people at the cafe. Make sense? Okay? Extroverted people, this is going back to what I said earlier, they become energized around a lot of people. Introverted types get energized after time alone. And the final one, I think this is actually really cute. Extroverted types, they talk in order to think. Introverted people think first in order to talk. Sarah, I see your comment, and yes, it can change. Doesn't mean that it's like that for your whole life. It can change. And also, like I find with one of my categories that I'm literally a 50-50 split. So even though most people will fall into one very solidly, in one of my areas, I'm literally like I can go either way. on one of the categories. Okay, so are we kind of clear about extroverted versus introverted? Do you have, after we've reviewed that, a sense about if you fall into one category or the other category? If you want to share where you think you fall, you can post it in the chat. Otherwise, obviously, you're welcome to keep it private. So that's your first, it's E versus I. Extroverted versus introverted. And that will be your first letter of the 4. Okay?
So when I did some of those types, personality types, mine, it's very interesting in a sense that I'm both extreme. So I learned through my upbringing and my social environment to be very social, become very social. But this exhausts me.
Right, so that's a telltale sign. So listen, introverted people, it's not that they can't be social. They can be very, very social. And they can be they can appear even to be extroverted, but you have to ask, where do you draw your energy from? That's really the key question here to decide if you're extroverted or introverted. So my husband is very extroverted. He can be in like a huge event in the shul and come back and he's like, woo, on a high, woohoo, let's keep going. Me, I come back, I need a nap. You know what I mean? So for me, I know I'm for sure, I draw my energy from that introverted space where I need quiet and downtime. So that's really the nook and cranny here. Where do you draw your recharge from? Okay, amazing. Let's keep moving. Next one. The next one is called sensing, so S, versus intuitive, which they use the letter N instead of I because we've already used I for introverted. Okay, so again, this is sensing type versus intuitive type. S versus N, like Nancy. Okay, here we go. Sensing types focus on the here and now. Intuitive types focus on possibilities, hunches, and theories. I'll say it again. Sensing types focus on the here and now, the reality of what's right in front of you. Intuitive types focus on possibilities, hunches, and theory. Okay, sensing types, they seek practical application and concrete results. Intuitive types enjoy theories, regardless of whether it's practical. Regardless of whether it has any practical. You said, can you give an example? You mean for this one? Gabrielle, did you mean for this one?
Sorry, I mute myself. Okay. For the first one.
Oh.
Just to...
So the example I gave for intuitive versus extrovert is to say, like let's say you go to an event at the synagogue.
I know the sensitive type, sensing type, and intuitive.
Oh, sensing and intuitive types. Okay, got it. So sensing types are like, they like the here and now, the reality, the concrete, the practical. Intuitive types are a bit more out there. They're kind of like in the realm of ideas, the realm of theory, the realm of imagination. That not necessarily caring if there's actually a practical application to what they're thinking about. Does that make sense? I'll keep going. There's more things here. Sensing types, they feel comfortable in the physical world. Intuitive types, they feel out of place in the physical world. Okay? Sensing types, they are not concerned with underlying or unconscious motivations. Intuitive types are always looking for the underlying cause and meaning behind everything. Okay? And the final thing they have here is sensing types, they see what exists in actuality in the real world. And intuitive types see the world in terms of symbols and metaphors. So a sensing type is much more concrete, and an intuitive type is much more imaginative, looking for meaning behind. Make sense? Okay, let's keep moving on. So now you've got you should have 2 letters, right? You've got your first 2 categories. Okay, I'm going to move us along into the next 2 categories. We have thinking, T, versus feeling, F. Thinking versus feeling. So let me start to read through this chart and give you an idea of where it holds. Okay, so the thinking types focus on ideas, goals, systems, facts, and theories. The feeling types focus on feelings and sharing feelings. Thinking types may undervalue feelings. They may not look at feelings as being so super important. Feeling types are more interested in people than in things. Make sense? Sarah Tikva, you'll be able to listen to the recording, okay? Bezat Hashem. All right, thinking types tend to be more impersonal, are brief in their communications, and more blunt and to the point. Feeling types prefer to be tactful as opposed to truthful, meaning they are sensitive to someone's feelings. Maybe they're going to fudge the truth a little bit in order to whatever they have to say is not going to come out sounding as much like a hammer. Okay, thinking types. Thinking types are stronger in their executive ability than in the social arts. And feeling types are constantly seeking emotional intimacy, closeness and connection, emotional closeness and connection. Again, you have to remember, just because one characteristic is more pronounced in one type doesn't mean that the other type doesn't also, let's say, seek emotional connection. They're just a little bit more factual in their presentation and maybe not valuing that as much as a feeling type. Does that make sense? Okay, thinking types expose wrongs in people or systems. Feeling types tend to be more compliant and seeking to please people and gain approval. Thinking types dislike talking about feelings, and feeling types permit feelings to sometimes override logic. Thinking types might somehow or sometimes hurt others without being aware. And feeling type people might become sick without having enough love in their lives. And finally, thinking types enjoy debating and confronting, while feeling types generally avoid any confrontation and conflict. So do you get this, the kind of the general feel between the differences between a thinking type and a feeling type? Does anyone need me to review any of that?
Would you mind to repeat the feeling type after the dislike talking about feelings, and then the thinking type after that one?
The thinking type might undervalue feelings, and the feeling type are much more interested in people than they are in things. Is that the one you mean? The feeling type will permit feelings to override logic at times. They let their feelings carry them away. Whereas the thinking type doesn't necessarily enjoy talking about feelings at all. That's just not their thing. They have feelings, of course, but don't necessarily want to discuss them. Make sense? Okay, so now you've got 3 of the 4 categories. So again, to review, the first category is either an E or an I. The second category is either an S or an N, sensing or intuitive. So far, the third category is thinking or feeling. So let's go to the fourth category. The fourth category is either judging or perceiving. Judging or perceiving. Okay, let's review this. Judging types like to save, I'm assuming money is what they're meaning. They like to save. And perceiving types like to spend liberally. Judging types are exclusive and selective, and perceiving types are inclusive and tolerant. Judging types prefer things that are more conventional and traditional, and perceiving types are drawn to things that are more unconventional. Judging types tend to be very obedient and dutiful. They're rule followers. They play by the book. Perceiving types tend to crave freedom and independence, and they tend to resist structure and restrictions. So before I even go further, you can imagine that people who have a tendency to be more religious in their nature are either going to be judging types or they're going to be perceiving types that have worked very, very hard to overcome their rebellious nature. Make sense? Because if you want to become an Eved Hashem, if you want to become a servant of Hashem and live according to Hashem's ways, those are your only choices. Your only choices are that it comes easier to you because you're a judging type, or it comes harder to you because you're a perceiving type. One way or the other, you have to find your way to tap into it, right? Okay. Judging types feel unsafe with anything new, and perceiving types love innovation and revolutionary and new ideas. Judging types, they like closure. They like specificity. They don't like ambiguity. Perceiving types like things open-ended, and they don't like long-term commitments. Judging types tend to be punctual, reliable, predictable, and exact. Perceiving types tend to be enthusiastic. They start with enthusiasm, but then they want to kind of move on and they tend to get bored. Judging types are more formal and proper, and perceiving types are more informal and casual. Finally, judging types tend to want to do what is considered right and proper, while perceiving types like to do what is exciting and fun. Okay? Isn't this fun? Isn't this fun to kind of go through this? I love this kind of stuff. Okay, so.
The funnest so far.
Right? So basically now you should have, this is again, we're doing this very superficially, right? There's a lot more to learn about each category. If you pick up a book or you go online and you learn more about each category, you might be able to kind of fine tune it. If you're kind of sitting half-half, in particular categories, between, let's say, judging and perceiving or any of the others, the more you learn about it, the more you should be able to kind of push yourself in one direction or the other. But like I said, for one of mine, I'm really, I can go either way. It really just depends on what I'm engaged in my life, at any particular time. So, but at this point now, you should have your 4 letters that would begin to kind of define your personality style according to the Myers-Briggs. So if you're open to it, I'm super curious if you want to post your personality type in the chat. It would be very interesting to see if we have among us, those of us that come to the shiurim, things in common. So my personality type tends to be N, and then I could go T or F, depending on what I'm doing. And then J. So Sarah, you're showing EINTJP. So like half on the E and the I and the J and the P. You have to kind of figure it out.
I feel like it depends on the situation.
Right, exactly.
Sometimes I'm extroverted and I love fun. And sometimes I'm very introverted and I'm very logical thinking and I want to save and I want to plan and I want to do all these things. And I feel like it's definitely changed as I got older.
That totally makes sense.
When I was younger, I was more of an ENFP. Like I was more feeling when I was younger. But I'm definitely blunt. So I'm definitely a thinker. And, you know, logic runs me much more than feelings.
Right. Amazing. And anyone else?
Yeah, I'm just typing it.
I have an observation, especially with the judging, perceiving.
Yeah.
My mom's not here with me, but I think she'd be okay with me sharing this. I think that both my mom and I would be judging in many, many, many categories, like really rooted in judging, but my mom has a lot more of that perceiving nature with innovation and lack of structure in her creativity. But I think that if I'm with her, like if we're traveling, because I'm so rooted in that judging, like obedient and formal, proper, following the rules, it allows her to lean more into her perceiving qualities because she can rely on my judging qualities.
Oh, that's so fascinating. I love that because that's such a great example, actually, of how personality types relate with one another, right? So, and it ties to that whole idea of holding space for someone else, right? So if your mom knows that you're kind of on it, right? Like your judging side is super active and on top of stuff, then she doesn't necessarily need to activate that part of herself. She can look at the other, she can kind of allow her guard to come down a little bit and allow that other piece of her personality to come forward. It's fascinating. I'm sure that's also how things play out in marriages as well with these personality types. Like if someone has a really particularly strong judging, then the spouse probably feels like, well, you know, they've got it covered. I don't necessarily need to be like that in the relationship, you know?
Yeah, I resonate with that too because the man I'm dating is very like thinking and like his structure and timeliness is on point. So when we go on a date, I'll forget my key or I'll drop things all around. But if I'm with my mom, I would never drop anything and I would, have 3 sets of keys to back us up. So it's a very interesting role that changes based on who I'm with and using my strengths or being able to lean into the other range that I'm maybe straddling in some ways with different people.
That's amazing. It's such a great real life example, and I'll tell you, when you talk about it and we see those examples of how it plays out in real time, in real relationships, and you're talking about the idea of wanting to build avas chinam, it can be really difficult to try to get along with someone who's very, very different than you and whose approach is very different than you. And so we see that it really does take effort. If you are a purely introverted type of a person and you're with someone who's extroverted, you have to know that at some point you're going to have to push past your introversion-ness because periodically the person you're with might want to actually go and enjoy an event with you. In which case you can't always say, nah, I'm going to stay home. Nah, I'm going to stay home. Nah, I'm going to stay home. And you send them off on their own. There has to be that kind. And the same is true. The opposite is also true, right? So an extrovert has to sometimes stay home. So there has to be that give and take in relationships. And but that's an impossible thing to do if we are not even aware of the fact that there are all these different personality types out there existing. Just kind of coming to know yourself a little bit better is a gateway to be able to relate better with other people and to know where and when you can push yourself in a direction that's not so comfortable and when you can kind of hold back, and ask someone else to kind of come towards your side So you are ENFJ minus. I'm making headway with my. That's cute. Yeah. So we can see where our own challenges arise in all the things we need to handle with life. You know, I would imagine, you know, when I think about it, parenting kids that are very different than you, and in these scopes of personality traits is obviously, it's a big challenge. It's you know, lechinuch et anar al pi darko. It's the idea of that you have to educate a child according to his way. And I think this ties into that idea. The idea that because everybody is unique and everyone has their own personality and their way of learning and their way of communicating, that when you find an excellent teacher, it's because that teacher understands the teacher has the skills to communicate in different ways with all the different types of kids sitting in their classroom. They understand that it can't be a one-size-fits-all approach in education. And that one-size-fits-all approach is not the Torah way. The Torah way is to really honor and recognize all these different types of personalities and to work with them as opposed to trying to demand that they change who they are. You know, so I think that can be a good question to ask ourselves. Where am I? Okay, bye. Purim Sameach. That can be a good question to ask yourself in your journal. Where am I asking someone to be someone that they can't be? Where are my expectations not appropriate or fair for another person? Maybe you have expectations of someone based on your own personality typing, and the other person is just literally not capable. They're not capable. Go ahead, Sarah.
Well, that also is very true with your children. Like, I have one child that's extremely introverted. And then my second one is the most extroverted person I've ever met in my life. She can't even be alone for 2 minutes. Like, you know, every kid is completely different. And I also feel like age plays a huge part. I feel like I was much more extroverted. I was much more feeling. I was much more perceptive when I was younger. But as I get older, I'm more introverted. I'm more logical. I'm more, you know, follow the rules, let's, you know, do these things instead of just fly by the seat of my pants. Let's just do whatever. Because I'm also an Aries, so that's an Aries trait.
Yeah, that also plays into it, right?
Well, it sure does.
So one of the things that they discuss in the book, and I'm not going to get into it at length, but you can seek it out if this is something that interests you, is they talk about the idea of the difference between someone who has integrated types versus non-integrated types. And basically what they're referencing is, like anything else, there's always like the upside of a characteristic and the downside of a characteristic. And so sometimes we have these personality characteristics and we're working from the downside of that characteristic, that part of the characteristic that might pull us down or is not the most effective way to be out in the world. But we can work on it. Like what you're saying, we can grow, and over time we can learn how to get to the upside of that characteristic and how to make the most of that characteristic. The same is written in the Jewish texts about astrological signs, like Sarah was just mentioning about Aries. Like there's upsides and downsides to each sign and how that plays out, and how do you learn from that? I mean, there's even in the love languages, you know, the upside and downside of any one way of communicating and relating with one another. So everything has the upside and the downside. So one of the things we have to look at when we're evaluating kind of our own personality type and our relationships and so forth is like, from where are we coming? From which side of it are we coming? When we are judging, right, but inherently in the English language, the word judging can have a negative connotation, right? I don't like to be judged. And do I have a right to judge another person, right? So that word inherently doesn't necessarily have a warm and fuzzy feeling. However, we know, according to Torah, having some element of judgment in your life is crucial to survival, right? We know you have chesed and you have gvura. You have the giving, sensitive, kind part, and you have the gevura. You have the judgment aspect of things. Without judgment, without boundary, right? We're just flying in the air. There's just nothing, So again, there's the negative aspect of judgment. If you're putting people down, if you're constantly on somebody's head, if you're constantly judging, thinking that you're so great and they're wrong, that's the negative aspects of that trait. But if you're using judgment to create boundaries, healthy boundaries, to decide for yourself, I want this in my life, but I don't want that in my life. In the context of relationship, I'm going to judge, not to judge the other person, but to say, okay, I'm making a judgment that I don't want that behavior of that person in my life. Right? That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to say, I don't want that person in my life. Okay? Chag Sameach. But to say, I don't want that behavior in my life, right? So there's the up and down of each character trait. Okay, on that note, it's already 10 after 11, so I'm going to let you guys go. But I do want to wish you a Chodesh Adar Sameach and a Purim Sameach. Everybody should have an easy fast for Ta'anit Esther. And I will email the recordings, Bezat Hashem, and also when will Bezat Hashem be able to meet again. Chag Sameach to everybody. Be well.
See you on Purim.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.